Have you ever walked down a familiar street only to suddenly find yourself in a different era? Buildings change, people dress strangely, and even the atmosphere feels like it's from the past or future. This is the time slip phenomenon, one of the most mysterious occurrences that science has yet to explain. Many people have shared their unbelievable experiences, from accidentally stepping into the Victorian era to catching glimpses of past decades within the modern world. Are these just illusions, or do invisible cracks in time allow us to peek into different realities? Let's dive into some of the most fascinating time slip stories and uncover the truth behind this mind-bending phenomenon. Story 1. Journey back to Victorian times in Birkenhead. In late March 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic was shaking the world, a homeless man named Gavin wandered through the deserted streets of Birkenhead, a town in the Merseyside area of England. Gavin, 45 years old, had been living on the streets for 3 years after alcohol addiction cost him the support of his friends and family. While searching for a place to spend the night, he remembered his old friend George, whom he hoped was still living in a small apartment above a shop on a nearby street. The weather was cold, the wind blew strongly, and Gavin wrapped himself tightly in his worn-out coat, pulling his scarf snug around his neck. In his hands, he clutched a small bag containing all his precious belongings: a 5-pound note, a small radio with a dying battery, a misplaced pair of reading glasses, some underwear, and a copy of Jonathan Livingston's Seagull. Everything seemed normal until something strange happened. Suddenly, the space around Gavin changed abruptly. The once empty streets were now filled with the noisy chatter of voices, the rhythmic clatter of horse hooves on pavement, and the creaking of carriage wheels over cobblestones. Bright golden sunlight unexpectedly broke through, dispelling the dull gray clouds. Gavin froze, stunned by the surreal transformation. At first, he thought he had accidentally wandered into a foreign country, but as he looked around, he realized the surroundings were still familiar, except for one major difference. The McDonald's restaurant on the corner had vanished, replaced by an old-fashioned pub. Gavin was bewildered. Everything around him seemed to have reverted to the past, possibly the Victorian era. As he prepared to step into the pub for answers, a policeman stopped him. The officer had piercing pale blue eyes and studied Gavin with suspicion. "Where are you from?" the firm voice demanded. Gavin took a deep breath and replied, "Officer, I am from the year 2020. As soon as he spoke the words, he realized how ridiculous they sounded, even to himself. The policeman raised an eyebrow skeptically. "That's quite a story you're spinning. Now tell the truth. Who are you, and what are you doing here?" Gavin hesitated before answering. "My name is Gavin Mitchell. I used to live on Claremont Road, Wallasey, 3 years ago. I was a computer programmer, but now I'm homeless." He knew the term computer programmer would be completely foreign to a policeman of that time, but he couldn't think of another way to explain himself. The officer adjusted his iron helmet slightly, frowning in confusion. "Are you sure you haven't hit your head somewhere?" Gavin swallowed hard, about to explain further, when suddenly loud shouting erupted from a distance. 2 men were fighting right outside the pub Gavin had intended to enter. Seeing the commotion, the officer quickly turned to Gavin and ordered sternly, "Stay right here. I'll be back." Then he rushed toward the scene to intervene. Gavin didn't hesitate. Seizing the opportunity, he immediately fled toward Grange Road, trying to get as far away from the officer as possible. As he ran, he nearly collided with a peculiar vehicle. A man pedaling a bicycle while pulling a small carriage carrying a woman wearing a massive hat adorned with artificial flowers. Gavin kept running, his heart pounding with fear. Upon reaching Conway Street, Gavin was stopped by 2 young men. "What's in the bag?" one of them asked, eyes gleaming with greed. "Just clothes, nothing valuable," Gavin tried to reply calmly. "Hand it over." One of the muggers yanked the bag from his hands, but before they could take anything else, a man from a nearby pawn shop stepped out, shouting, "Give that back to him, or I'll call the police." The 2 thieves hesitated before tossing the bag to the ground and walking away. The kind man approached Gavin and asked if he was all right. After thanking him, Gavin hesitantly asked, "Excuse me, but what year is this?" The man looked puzzled by the question, but replied anyway, "It's 1909. Are you feeling all right? Maybe you should see a doctor." Hearing the year, Gavin felt dizzy, and a wave of nausea washed over him. And in the blink of an eye, he was back in 2020, standing in the exact same spot on the deserted street. The surreal experience haunted Gavin for days. Not long after, he fell ill with COVID-19. As he lay in bed, a terrifying thought struck him. Could he have unknowingly carried the virus from the future to 1909, infecting the people he had interacted with? If so, he might have left an unimaginable mark on the timeline. Story 2: A Glimpse into the Past. On a late October afternoon in 2022, as the sun began to set, Emily and her boyfriend Michael were driving along a highway in Pennsylvania, near the border with New Jersey. They had been together for 5 years and often enjoyed road trips to explore new places. That day was no exception. As their car glided past dense roadside trees, a clearing suddenly opened up, revealing a small shopping center with a sparsely populated parking lot. Emily glanced at the shopping center and noticed a few glowing neon signs. She didn't pay much attention at first, until their car passed another gap in the trees. Looking at the shopping center a second time, she froze. The scene before her no longer looked the same. The parking lot was now filled with old-fashioned cars, seemingly from the 1980s or 1990s. The bright neon signs had disappeared, replaced by a worn-out storefront under renovation, surrounded by scaffolding and construction barriers. The image lasted only a fraction of a second before everything reverted to normal. Emily blinked several times, wondering if she was imagining things. She turned to Michael, who seemed focused on driving, and hesitantly described what she had just seen. She didn't expect much of a response, thinking it might have been a trick of the light or fatigue. But to her surprise, Michael had seen the exact same thing. He admitted that he had planned to ignore it, assuming it was just an optical illusion or exhaustion from the long drive. The two sat in silence for a few moments, trying to rationalize the bizarre phenomenon they had just witnessed. In the following days, Emily couldn't shake the memory of the strange sight. She decided to research the shopping center they had passed. After digging through the internet, she discovered that the location had undergone major renovations in the late 1990s. According to historical records and archived photographs, the old facade had indeed been replaced around that time. This perfectly matched the image she and Michael had glimpsed in that fleeting moment on the road. The discovery sent chills down Emily's spine. Had they truly seen a version of the shopping center from the past? Or was it merely a shared hallucination caused by fatigue and overactive imaginations? Both were open-minded about paranormal phenomena, but neither had ever experienced anything quite like this. The two stories above serve as compelling evidence of the time slip phenomenon, moments when people seem to glimpse or even experience a reality from the past. Are these just illusions, or do hidden cracks in time allow us to peek into another world? If time isn't as linear as we believe, perhaps these mysteries are only the tip of the iceberg. Have you ever had a similar experience? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to uncover more fascinating mysteries.